I would be so happy to introduce you to Darren Webb, who's the founder and CEO of a high-growth startup in the disability sector called Mindset Care. And it's also my go ahead and clap for Darren. It's my pleasure also to introduce alongside Darren Dmitry Konevsky, who is a research scientist and engineer at Google DeepMind, and has been firmly a wonderful friend and mentor to many in the disability sector. So we're so happy to have both Darren and Dmitry here.
Thank you.
And in conversation, I wanted to direct the conversation first to Darren and then to Dmitry. And I think it's such a treat to have both Dmitry and Darren together. Dmitry and Darren are working at the very cutting edge of where the interests and design potential of disability meets the future of technology. And so it's such an exciting conversation. Let's start with you, Darren. Darren, tell me a little bit about what your company does. What is its stated mission?
Yeah, pleasure to meet everyone here. Again, I'm Darren Webb, and the founder and CEO at Mindset Care. And what we do is we assist those with a mental illness and their caregivers in applying for Social Security disability benefits. So that's two programs, SSI and SSDI. What we've done is we've essentially TurboTaxed that process. What can take you days or weeks to do by yourself or with a local representative, we get all applications filed within an hour, and we represent these claimants through the entire process. The average time right now from initial application through an appeal nationwide is about 15 months. It's a very long process. So we are there as these claimants' representative.
And so why on earth did you decide to create such a solution? And let me ask you something just for folks in the audience to better understand how many Americans with disabilities rely on Social Security and Social Security disability insurance. Do you know?
Yeah, right now it's about 11 million and should be a lot more than that.
So millions of Americans with disabilities have been accessing programs through the Social Security insurance program probably since the Great Society, but the program dates back to FDR.
That's correct.
And you're the first to want to apply technology to the way people can access that program. Why? Why are you doing it?
Yeah, it's, I'm on a personal vendetta. I am a caregiver for a very close loved one with schizophrenia. Tried to help him go through this process of applying for benefits when he was released from incarceration. And, as excited as I was for him to get back home to the family and see him, I was just a bit more excited for him to get back on his disability benefits so I didn't have to continue paying for his mortgage, his car, his student loans, the random credit cards I found. And going through this process, I just went onto SSA's website, I downloaded the paperwork, and I was overwhelmed. I had to go request medical records and do all that stuff. I then got in touch with 2 to 3 local disability attorneys. This is what they do. And they all mailed me about 2 to 3 pounds of paperwork. That got me even more mad. So I called them all back and I said, hey, can you just DocuSign this to me? And they said, what are you talking about? And at that very moment, I said, okay, we've got to do something about that. And kind of since that day, we've been on this mission to make this process just a lot easier for caregivers, for those that are suffering, for social workers that do this, for those that are, that need help. So.
And, do you think that the design of the product itself was informed by you being a caregiver? And how have you designed differently with that experience in mind?
We've designed it not only for the consumer, but for us internally to get these claims out the door even faster. I'll give you an example. Right now, we get about 40 pounds of mail a day because we are copied on all of the mail that Social Security sends to the claimant. That should be 10 people in a mailroom, but we just have one person that opens it. Our AI reads it, scans it, sends out the automated messages, sends it to our case managers to be able to take action. When it comes to just designing a really easy to use kind of product that can be used from a phone that only works on 3G, understanding our claimant base. Many of them are coming out of incarceration, coming out of hospital. They're going and buying a phone from Rite Aid or, name your grocery store, and that's what they're using. It needs to be accessible to work on everything.
So one of the things that I learned in meeting Darren, and as the founder and managing partner of Enable Ventures that is invested in Mindset Care as a portfolio company, one of the value propositions was how many people are actually impacted by this technology, and how many people have not been impacted by Social Security because it was out of reach and should be impacted by a cornerstone of the income assistance program in the United States.
Right.
Darren, can you talk about how you, from the very beginning, realized that the fate of your company is deeply tied to your ability to outreach to the disability community itself? What does it mean from the perspective of how your company will grow and scale, what your relationship is to the disability community in terms of outreach?
Yeah, it's in our DNA. It's we know where to go and find this constituency, this population. We have teams on the ground that go to the jails. We have access to go into the jails. We wait for them for when they get released. We go to homeless shelters. We go to hospital emergency rooms where 52% of serious mental illnesses are diagnosed at the emergency room. And we just show up in places where they are. We're in Brooklyn and Queens, New York, hanging out at the park and just trying to assist those that really need it. So understanding that right now there's 11 million Americans that receive disability benefits. There are 15 million Americans alone with a serious mental illness that we have identified that should be eligible. So we are way under kind of the number to be able to help all of those that need it.
What does it mean? There's one layer of change, material impact here in this conversation, which has to do with access to income assistance. How do our systems work such that you can lack access to income assistance and it has downward effects on whether you access healthcare?
Yeah.
How are you seeing that play out in your product?
It's more than healthcare. It's housing as well. We've partnered with a lot of local housing authorities. Social Security is their income, and they have to show that income when they go apply for housing. Once you are on SSI, for example, you're automatically eligible for Medicaid. Now you can go get the medication that you need. If you're on SSDI, you have to wait 5 months, then you get Medicare. So it's all intertwined, and we are working with providers to be able to assist their members.
And what are the ramifications when systems fail to modernize, when they have lack of access to technology? In this case, what was happening as the status quo ante before your solution in the application for Social Security benefits?
What's still kind of happening, unfortunately, I have to go find a fax machine, or you would have to go find a fax machine if Social Security requests an update. I don't know where to go find a fax machine. They closed the last Staples by my house. So just access via phone. Very early on, we had trouble getting back in touch with claimants who we signed up. And I would always notice we would get a surge of calls on the 2nd of the month. And I said, why is that? Well, that's because they ran out of their government-funded minutes on their cell phones, and they had used up all of their internet over a 20-day period. They give you 30 days. So what we did is we went and partnered with a company called TrueConnect. They're the largest provider of government-subsidized cell phones where they get unlimited minutes, unlimited text, and unlimited data. Anyone that needs a cell phone, we ship it to them in 48 hours. It protects our ability to be able to stay in touch with them, stay in touch with Social Security, and then more importantly, stay in touch with their loved ones.
And then in terms of product design and sort of democratizing access to a program that people are presumptively eligible for but have not accessed legal counsel or have been outside the ambit of assistance in applying, how are you not passing on costs to consumers? How are you making sure that the product is accessible to people that otherwise wouldn't have access? But who's the payer here?
Right, yeah. So our model, we get compensated from Social Security. And I'll kind of explain how. We get a one-time 25% fee of the claimant's back pay that is capped at $7,200. That's codified into law. I didn't make that up. So what back pay is if you submit an application in September of 2024, and I'll use a round number, it takes 12 months for your application to be accepted. Every month you're waiting, you start to accrue benefits. So they're going to get one large check. A year later, we get 25% of that. and they will continue to receive their benefits in perpetuity, and we don't touch that. So we also don't have to go chase after them for the money. Social Security sends us a direct deposit, which is helpful.
So where do you think this is going in terms of the private market being able to provide solutions that really democratize access to government programs that the community, and for those that don't know the size of the disability community, we're really talking about 1 in 4 American adults, 1.5 billion people on planet Earth, nearly half of all people in the United States in long-term poverty. So we're talking about those that would ostensibly be eligible for public programs and for particularly programs that are part of an anti-poverty regime of the last 50 years of governmental intervention. What does it mean for the private sector to be able to marshal solutions that give people access to these programs?
It means a lot. As a startup, we're able to test things. We've tested a lot of things. The government doesn't necessarily have the will or the opportunity to do that. It's hard to turn a big boat or just a speedboat that can do a lot of different things. When it comes to the private market being able to assist, I've identified other government processes that can be helped, and our technology can be inserted into outside of just disability. The fact that everything is still mail first and paper first is kind of not a good thing. Understanding that this population doesn't even have kind of permanent addresses. Many of them are in and out of homeless shelters. You can reach them on their phone, but it's not allowed yet. So one thing I will say is Social Security, and that's the only government organization I can say that we've worked with, they are very forward thinking. They're trying to be. They've got a massive budget. They do still have all of their servers on-prem. Nothing's on the cloud, so just to show you kind of who we're dealing with. But they are interacting with the private market to see where they can innovate, and they've been very open to feedback from the market, which is helpful.
And you mentioned the lack of permanent address, which can really stymie people from accessing public programs. How have you actually, in a great example of public-private partnership, worked to get cell phones in the hands of people with disabilities who would use your program?
Yeah, that's right. So TrueConnect, which I mentioned earlier, again, it's the largest provider of government subsidized cell phones. They get a free smartphone, unlimited data, unlimited minutes, and just the fact that we can get in touch with them, get their information to them. When Social Security sends you a letter and says, we need to hear from you in 5 days, doesn't mean 6 days. It means 5 days. So this allows us to protect their claim.
A lot of the subtext of what you're describing is the use of artificial intelligence as well. And so many people in the community hear about AI in impact forums where only the downside of not safeguarding, stress testing, and being mindful of privacy, security, and all the inherent externalities and negative ramifications of AI. That's where we hear the most public discussion right now, I would say. How have you approached that, being mindful of those issues, but also baked into the core of what you're doing, an ability to leverage this new technology to reduce somebody like yourself receiving 4 pounds of mail on behalf of your brother?
Yeah, no.
And pardon me, 4 pounds of medical documentation that you needed to then in turn turn around to the Social Security Administration.
That's right. So internally, it just speeds the process up. It checks for mistakes, making sure that we're not, submitting false information. AI can catch something that, maybe 4 to 6 eyeballs didn't because we're tired and it's 6 o'clock. But then on the other side, we need to make sure that the AI isn't hallucinating and telling us something is right when it isn't. So that's a big thing. And we have a lot of checks. We have our own internal built LLM. We use every single LLM out there, and we compare and contrast to make sure that we're getting the best result out at the end.
So, we often ask founders in our market, would you be able to do what you're doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
No.
And the answer is always no. So the allegory here is arrive on the scene at the right time with the right place at the right time.
Yep.
To make real change.
Yep.
And last question I'll ask you before we move on to Dimitri is, what would your own technology that you've invented, Mindset Care, have done for you and your brother? How do you think that would have changed the experience of it in his life?
Yeah, I mean, it would have changed our entire life. Getting benefits faster. He doesn't go to check the mail, right? So just missing deadlines and, just having a representative that is truly there for you, it would have saved a lot of heartache.
There's a lot of statistics that have been thrown around. Last year, I saw one that really made me sit up straight, which was that 30,000 people with disabilities died on the wait list for Social Security benefits, waiting for a response, not being denied and not being accepted into benefits, but waiting for a response.
Yeah.
So you're really getting at the core of optimizing the claims process in a way that cuts down on what for many people is multi-year wait. What is your average wait time?
So we're literally month over month, we're getting better by weeks. The average time nationwide it takes for an initial application to be accepted is about 8 months. Overall, from start to finish, it's 16 months. I mean, we're starting to see our initial applications at 5 months versus 8 months. So that's something we're very, very proud about. And that's just because we're getting the information that is needed up front. It's fraud-free. Medical records are there. We're not waiting for anything.
That's great. So I'm going to turn to Dimitri, and then we're going to loop back to questions at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Just want to make sure you're working. Okay, great.
I'm ready to answer.
Okay. Okay, so Dimitri, you are a bit of a legendary character. You're at DeepMind, Google DeepMind, and a engineer. You've spent your life. I think it's fair to say your life's work has been communication technology, and in particular, I think that Dimitri is regarded around the world as somebody that has been on the bleeding edge of artificial intelligence, on perfecting communication, and has actually invented a technology that he's using today and that everybody uses, live transcribed through Google. And the interesting thing about Dimitri and I have met several times, but we nearly every conference that we attend together, we cause a lot of trouble because we end up in a corner talking about AI instead of whatever the given topic is at the conference. And so it's a real treat and an honor to have Dimitri join us today. But Dimitri, you've spent your life leveraging the bleeding edge of technology to uplift personal potential, and particularly people's ability to communicate and effectively speak with one another. Can you tell folks a little bit about your scientific and engineering background? I'm thinking mostly about your 300 or so patents. Talk to us about the origin story of your career, your scientific background.
So let me explain first what you see now. It's speech recognition adapted to my voice. It's specifically trained. It may make sometimes errors. So if you don't understand me, you can read transcription. So thank you for your question. And I'm excited to talk about AI at your panel. So my background is mathematician. I received PhD in Russia many years ago. I completely lost hearing in old age, but I lived very well in Russia, so there was no problem for me to communicate. But then when I emigrated, I first emigrated to Israel. I worked in Israel at the Weizmann Institute of Science, then at Max Planck Institute in Germany. the Institute for Advanced Study in America. When I was in America, I realized that there was absolutely no transcription technology. It was very hard for me to communicate. And I decided that I'll make a break in mathematics and move to technology. So I moved to company where I developed speech recognition. First, I thought in 5 years we'll achieve speech recognition that will be good for communication. But after 5 years, I thought, the next 5 years we achieve it. But finally, when I moved to Google 10 years ago, we finally achieved speech recognition technology so good. It was first for YouTube closed caption. Then when I saw it so good for closed caption, I moved to Mountain View. We moved this technology to phones. It was first was live transcribe. It is not live transcribe, because live transcribe is speaker independent. I'll show it too. So live transcribe completely changed life of many people. It has many, many million users every month. It is available in 120 languages. And it was saving where there was pandemic, because everybody used a mask. You could not really breathe. Then, but live transcribe was trained on YouTube data. You cannot find on YouTube my speech. You cannot find other non-standard speeches. So you choose different approach. You started to develop speech application specifically when you need to speak a few phrases. So I recorded a few phrases, it was strange for me. Then we started to use this for other people who had ACL. So started to have a lot of people with non-standard speech. So just an example, how speech recognition can completely transform. So for the first time, it gave me freedom. I could understand what other people speak, and they could understand me. And I could go back to mathematics. And 2 years ago, I finally solved old mathematical problem, 50 years old, that my advisor gave when I was his student. So I was rushed to send him proof, because he was very old. So I'm very glad that I had time to read my proof. He presented this in German at mathematical seminar. He was director of Max Planck Institute. And he recently he passed. So I went to the conference, international conference in Poland, and for the first time I could present my result and communicate with mathematicians. It's truly a revolutionary example of AI. Now, before you ask questions, I'll switch to live transcribe so people will see your question.
So this is wonderful. Okay. Well, my question, Dimitri, is do you think you would have set out on such a odyssey of technology and curiosity if you didn't have a disability?
This is a good question. You cannot, for disability, I always thought you need to consider as something that helps you to solve problem. So you need to think about problem as something that has potential. If you solve it, then it helps everybody. That's why people with disabilities, because they are so creative, they learn whole life to overcome problems. They are very good for this. And another interesting thing, accessibility actually is driving things to mainstream because where at the beginning technology is bad. Example, speech recognition. At the beginning, it has so many errors that we cannot use this in mainstream. But people who did not hear were ready to use this. Because even it has, say, 10 errors for 100 words, it still understand what we speak. So for many years, communication for people who do not hear was main motivation for developing speech recognition before it was ready for mainstream. So you can find many such examples.
So we might not have speech recognition technology at all, or we might not have the version that we have if it wasn't for people who utterly needed it to optimize their experience in communication and removing barriers. The question I have is, that's a really great example of a conversation that you and I had, Dimitri, in the corner, making trouble, where we were actually, and I'll tell the audience what we were doing. We were at a conference where the discussion was about diversity. And it was about how do we drive more people with disabilities into more boardrooms, into more decision making, and particularly in tech. How do we get folks from mailroom to boardroom in tech? And we were over in the corner, and the conversation was really about hiring and really not about tech. It was really about workforce. And we were over in the corner, and Dimitri turned to me and said, yeah, but how do we make sure people have a job at all? Because artificial intelligence is going to disrupt so dramatically. And beyond that, I pushed him a little, and I said, well, how do we take it a step further and make sure that people who are deaf, who are blind, who have physical, mental, emotional, intellectual, developmental disabilities are building artificial intelligence and are building it in ways that reflect the manifold diversity of our society. So then I did something really crazy. I said, Dimitri, go up in the front of the room, and when it's your turn, say this to everybody in the audience. And they were all discussing employee resource groups and recruitment strategies. And I said, just go drop the AI bomb. So Dimitri, tell everybody what happened when you did that. Of what you said on that stage that day.
Basically, I said, we do not mention elephant in the room. This is AI. It affects a lot of the jobs. Some jobs will disappear. Some new jobs will come. So we need to discuss how we need to prepare students a new environment. How they need, what kind of jobs they need to learn, what kind of skills will be still available in 10 years, in 15 years. And thank you for pushing me to tell everybody.
Well, what opportunity does that present? What opportunity does this present? This total disruption we know is here, not coming, but here. What opportunity does shuffling the cards present to the disability community itself? Where do you see the convergence of AI and the disability experience going in the near future?
First, I think that at some degree, notion of disability, as we know now, will disappear. Because AI will provide such opportunities for people to compensate for their disability. They will not perceive themselves as having disability. For example, I myself completely do not perceive official my diagnosis in Russia was mute and deaf. I even was not allowed to enter Moscow State University. If you come in Soviet Union to Moscow State University, at entrance it says big board, deaf and blind people are not allowed to enter Moscow State University in the Soviet Union. It required effort of my school where I studied. It was for hearing people, mathematical school. My parents and lobbied education to give me exception to enter Moscow State University. It's extreme example. But basically, this is one of the things that will happen. People with disability will not perceive themselves as having disability because I will completely compensate them how they do.
And I'm going to actually switch to reply to you and ask you the question and also bring it back to Darren. There is a strong culture in the disability community and in different parts of the disability community, which is rather heterogeneous. It's a culture rooted in historical discrimination and one that is honoring a sense of agency about the power that comes from the organized disability movement, which was a rights-based movement. Now, I hear you strongly, Dimitri, saying that we will neutralize obstacles that have been in the way, whether communication, mobility, cognition, hearing, sight, with leapfrogging, lightning advances in artificial intelligence. What will happen to culture and historical identity? And how can we make sure that the next generation of companies, and I'm looking at you, Darren, really continue in relationship, in strong relationship to those that you're building for and with? There is a stigma attached to for because big tech has long ignored people who are deaf, people who are blind, people with physical, emotional, intellectual disabilities. So what is the answer to say if we neutralize barriers, we are not ignoring or blotting out cultural history?
That's a heck of a question right there.
Go ahead, take your shot, both of you.
You know,
But first, I want to tell you one example that shows it's very essential to preserve some cultural elements. For example, let's take sign language. Sign language, it is cultural aspect. Like we have population with some language. And what happened when cochlear implant was developed, parents understood that their children can hear, so they stopped to teach them to sign language. Some parents. So it's something that we don't want to happen, and don't consider speech recognition as something that eliminates sign language. Somehow, automatic speech recognition is easier task than automatic sign language. We are working at Google to develop automatic sign language recognition, but it may take more years before it will be developed. But development of automatic speech recognition does not mean that automatic sign language needs to be eliminated, it needs to be supported, because it represents identity for a lot of people. It's cultural element. So this is one example that maybe is relevant for other disabilities and for other disadvantaged groups.
Yes, and for some, the language of ASL is an entirely different culture and language that some might recognize as the difference between ASL and captioning is the difference between being born and immigrating from one country as opposed to another. Darren, what's your response to this in terms of how do you plan a business strategy, execute on a go-to-market strategy, intend to scale prolifically to meet a very vast unmet need and not leave the community behind in terms of culture?
Right. I think culture is bigger than just these borders of the United States. It's worldwide. My family's from Trinidad and Tobago. When you go there, anyone that's disabled is a second-class citizen, right? That's just what it is. If you have a mental illness, you're crazy. If you've got a physical disability in a wheelchair, you kind of just set off to the side. What can we do to ramp up their government's efforts in assisting their own community and their culture? Culture is worldwide. It's not just here in San Francisco or in New York where I'm at. It's how can we really go beyond when you want to talk about scale? How can we go beyond just these borders that we've created to really help those who desperately need it? We're all blessed to be Americans. We've got the best healthcare. We've got the best programs. Even though we're trying to make them better, it's just understanding that there's more people out there.
Now, you're under your umbrella. You are a solution for those that are eligible for Social Security insurance and Social Security disability insurance. That's a pretty heterogeneous group of people with disabilities in America. Do you focus yourself in outreach strategy to make sure that you're really becoming available to the channels that would serve people with various disabilities?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Just these relationships that we've made with these distribution vessels. The biggest way for us to get to our community is to go replace the social worker and the case manager's job that already does this type of work. So we will go and partner with the social worker in the jail. There's like one social worker for every 400 inmates, and she has to do this by hand. We don't charge them. We go in there and we say, hey, we'll do this for free, and they're very happy because they can go do other very important social worker work. So I think that's just going to continue to be a main part of what we do in, helping out that part of the community.
So, Dimitri, when you began your career, I can repeat, when you began your career, did you ever imagine a day when there would be a Darren Webb leveraging artificial intelligence to help people apply for benefits at scale?
I maybe have different ideas how I would like to help mental health. I believe one of the biggest problems in mental health, if people get medicine, you do not know how to control it helps or not, because they'll be meet once per month with psychiatrists, or once per week. It's difficult to control what happens. But with artificial intelligence, we can give them wearable devices that can monitor every day, every minute. If person has depression, it has some delusions, and this information can go immediately to psychiatrists, so they can monitor person for the first time every minute. This could radically change how you help people with mental health, especially if you try to change doses of how much you take. It's difficult to control. So maybe you want a little bit to reduce dose, but you do not know if depression goes up or down. So you want to control this all the time. This is opportunity for AI to provide significant breakthrough for mental health. And it directly answers to your question about Social Security.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you this.
New company, Gina?
That's another company. Yes. But so we spent a lot of time talking about reducing backlogs and improving the using tech and leveraging tech to democratize access to resources and programs. The other thing that we often hear about in public conversations about disability is what the downside negative ramifications are for the disability community never making it to the table, never making it to the artificial intelligence table in particular, but big tech in general. And when folks with disabilities are in the product design phase before a go-to-market strategy is executed, how does that actually strengthen and prevent downstream effects? One of you mentioned hallucination, but is there an argument here that the best tech in the world will be made as it's stress tested? There's a word that's emerging very strongly from Silicon Valley, red teaming, where we're stress testing product for all of its potential ramifications. How can we actually do that, Dimitri? How can we actually do that effectively unless we're stress testing that product with
Actually,
with people?
prototype
Yeah.
at Google, it was haptic device. So if you have audio hallucination, if you feel dog barking, but it does not vibrate, you have haptic device. You understand it hallucination, and you show this to psychiatrists. They like this. They said it could really help people to distinct if what they hear is real or what is
A
here is
hallucination.
vibration.
Real
So
hallucination.
this is just an example how unexpected we initially developed haptic to help people who do not hear to feel sound. Suddenly discovered it helps people against to detect hallucination. And we are very surprised when we discovered it helps people who have Parkinson. People who have Parkinson. Parkinson, I mean.
Parkinson's. Yes.
It's
Parkinson,
sometimes
no, but
because
Parkinson's.
we are contacted by people who have Parkinson. We send our haptic device, and when they apply it to fingers, they could modulate frequencies. Their tremor reduces significantly. So this is an example that you can develop unexpected product that can help unexpected areas.
Yes.
So now a lot of people use our prototype to experiment of Parkinson too.
Yes. You got it right. Parkinson's. And so that idea of inclusive and universal design and beginning to design for one really hard problem and having really profound and positive benefits to other groups is something the disability community really invented and something that has now become part of the canon of technological design. But this idea also of the group or the end user experience, the folks that have the most to lose, people that have the most significant ramifications if the tech is not upholding personal privacy and privacy, in your case, Darren, as your company touches very private medical information and records en masse at scale. How can you see a world where the technology is optimizing the disability experience, in this case, access to really vital benefits and possibly healthcare,
Yep.
but you are leveraging that same technology to root out fraud or to root out breach of personal privacy?
100%. And again, AI just makes things faster. It allows us to do one thing with one developer that previously took 4 or 5. It makes our tools faster. It makes feedback faster. When we're testing things, we don't have to go read the logs. The AI tells us what the logs are saying, which is, really, really important. As we build, we test, and then we launch, and then, we continue to test. And that's where we're really starting to build that out. We're using third-party tools for that, that do leverage AI to just give us faster feedback loops to then just go, create a better product.
So, Dimitri, a minute ago, you were saying that you think that the disability barriers that are presented by disability have the ability to be radically neutralized by technology in the future. What will happen if that technology lacks humanity? How do we ensure that in removing barriers, we don't actually remove the human part of how we design that technology?
This is a good question. I actually want to tell you example what I tell at the big companies. If you want to get people with disabilities hired by companies, first hire managers who are kind, who are sympathetic to people, because ability to be sympathetic to people, you cannot train this. You need to be born with this. Mm-hmm. But if you start to hire managers or grow people into manager chain who are very sympathetic, very kind, you get a lot of more people with disabilities to be hired. This is not all answer directly your question, but basically you can tell about the same. You need to put principle of for artificial intelligence, how they need to perceive people, how they need to accept people, need to be sympathetic.
So it needs to be trained with a sense of humanity.
Basic as principle.
So it needs to be trained with a sense of humanity. The artificial intelligence at its core needs to be trained by people who understand how people need support and help and optimization. Is that right?
Yes, something like this.
So we have 5 minutes and want to take questions.
Part of AI principles.
As a business.
Part of basic AI principles that you put in foundation how you develop AI.
Yeah. In the foundational principles. So we'd love to take questions from the audience. I was instructed to take them in writing, but I don't think we have time for that. I think we should just take them. So would anyone like to ask our panelists a question? In the back, oh my goodness. Okay, let's start here. Thibaut.
Hi, Denise. I was born in a deaf family, so sign language is really important for me. I wanted to ask you about the role of professional captioning. When you come to an organization like this one or to a company, do you think people who are deaf or hard of hearing should ask for professional captioning or only rely on artificial intelligence?
This is a good question. It's also very personal to me. It's personal to me because I was one who helped to organize and invent card services via internet. Many years ago, before we had good speech recognition, I helped to organize card services who could transcribe using programs, and they could transcribe remotely. And there was some company where card transcribers were my friend for many years. They were transcribing for me. And suddenly, when we started to develop captioning, automatic caption, I stopped to use the technology. So it was a little bit painful for me. But answering your question, speech recognition still has a lot of deficiencies that you do not have with card transcriber. So it depends on what kind of meeting you have. Because if card transcriber, you can identify names who is speaking. They'll not make some very stupid errors. If you give in advance technological terminology, you'll write it correctly. But if you have some kind of meeting, not so critical, where you can see who is speaking, if some technological terminology is missing, you can guess this, then you can use automatic transcription.
I think we had someone in the back right corner. Please go ahead.
Hello. So coming from, or asking Darren question. Okay, so just for context, 2 years ago I went through a mental health experience. Went to mental health hospital 2 times, diagnosed with bipolar. So my question is, I'm very curious, like, what is next in your impact, or what you're planning to do next. I'm really curious on the livelihood of the people who are actually accessing these funds. And I say that because it has been a lot harder for me experiencing what I went through and integrating into society. And I say that where I have had more thoughts of suicide than ever before after this experience, and how the society has affected me and traumatized me through this experience. So I'm really curious on, like, how many people you have supported and helped, and then how many people have continued to live their lives, and how many people have passed away, and how many people,
Thank you for sharing your story. Very, very touchful there. Listen, we help thousands of people a month, and we have claimants that die waiting for a year, die waiting after 6 months. They pass away after receiving their money. One thing, just to make sure, is I'm not a doctor. We are not psychologists. We are not, we don't help with the medical portion of that, but we do have partners that do that. So we've gone out and partnered with Brave Health, where in 12 states you can go and speak with a psychiatrist and a doctor within 24 hours. We know that's what we need to do to help support. As far as on the product side for us, we understand that giving someone that hasn't had money in a while and dumping $20,000 into their account might not be good. So what does, financial education look like? What does a debit card look like? I get calls and text messages. I don't know how they get my email and my number and things like that, but can I borrow $50 so I can go to the grocery store? Can I borrow $20 so I can get this cab? Well, our data is going to tell us really soon who will get accepted or not. And while you're waiting for 15 months, I will loan you money at 0% interest, right? Because I know that I'll get it back. It's a very fine line. This is a government, entity, and I don't want to break the rules that we don't know. But if it's something that we can't do, we're going to try and find a partner to help. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you, man.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Very interested in what the work you're doing, and my question is, how much do you think it would impact your success if you could work with these individuals before they're released from the incarceration? Would it be impactful to you?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
It sounds like there's going to be a proposal later, some sort. That's cool.
Expensive, yeah.
And yes, sir. Go ahead.
So this is a comment. I've been wearing hearing aids since I'm 6 years old. Radio Shack. and a receiver over a bell tone receiver with the blue thing on the bottom saying, yeah, that's supposed to enhance the volume. What a freaking far cry we've come from 40 years, even 10 years. And this is the first time I've seen where this put caught to shame, the court service where you need a stenographer. This is fantastic. I'm seeing this. I'm seeing Dimitri's fund. This is the best accessible communication forum I've ever been to. And I've been to plenty of them, so kudos.
Thank you. And I think for final question in the back.
Hi, Sophia. I'm in the coaching space, which has a bad rep. But I would say a lot of my work in that world is about uplifting and encouraging people to access their inner strength. And as I'm listening to this conversation about access to these incredible technologies and tools, and in my own work, I've used, there's a new technology, the Aura Ring, which measures heart, whatever that measurement is about your pace of heart. And through my study with Coaching World, I've learned that the beats per heart, whatever that measurement is, can actually be an indicator of where you are emotionally. So, you know, I'm making these connections because it's relevant to my work, but I fear that if, with privatization, and so I'm interested in the intersection between privatization and government, because I feel like we have to do so much work to make those connections because these technologies are privately owned. So I just wonder about that, and if, you know,
Well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic, and really great insights from you coming from you. And I think the interesting and exciting moment that we're in is here we have a private company that has conceived of a solution that one probably only could design if they had personally experienced the frustration of systems not working well, but that is utterly serving the governmental interests of one of the cornerstones of our government. But doing it agilely and in partnership. So it's very much, we're seeing examples of excellence of public-private partnership. But I think you have a really strong point that many people have opined about the three legs of a stool, which is economic participation, healthcare, and community life. And if we can get those three things right, and I think in our marketplace today, particularly in the disability sector, and I want to say I see the faces of many entrepreneurs in this room who are working in our sector. If we get those three legs of the stool right, we can see massive disruptive change at scale in ways that can really uplift human experiences. And that was the intent of this panel, is to really whet the appetite around what is happening out there in the marketplace with Darren at a big tech company at Google, and in so many other high growth startups in our sector. So if it interests you, we would be so happy to continue the conversation in the hallway or after the panel. But thank you so much for coming.